Good afternoon. It is Thursday, September 12th, 2013 at approximately 2:42 p.m. and this meeting of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority is now in session. Ms. Rowe, are there any public comments? Sorry for the delay. The weather's caused us all just a little bit extra transit time, but we are on our way now. Item number 3, adoption of the minutes for the CRRMA board meeting of August 14th, 2013. Is there a motion to approve? Is there a second? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Minutes are approved. Item 4, discussion and action on a board resolution to award the Airway Interchange Aesthetic Project and to the Airway Interchange Aesthetics Project and to authorize the Executive Director to issue a limited notice to proceed. Mr. Tejas?
Raymond Tejas, Executive Director of the Camino Real RMA. As you know, we've brought a couple items to you in the past about this particular project.
Move your microphone a little closer, Raymond.
All right, how's that?
A little better, thanks.
Okay. As you know, we've had various briefings on this project in the past, and as recently as August 28th, we actually had the bids submitted for the construction portion of this project. 4 bids were submitted, as was included in your backup. The actual bid tab, the unofficial letting results were provided to you all, with the apparent low bidder being CF Jordan Construction LLC with a bid amount of $7,117,000 or $117,310.55. So what you have before you today is a resolution seeking to do 2 things. The first is to authorize the Executive Director to begin negotiations with the apparent low bidder of CF Jordan Construction LLC, and also authorize the Executive Director to issue a limited notice to proceed, whereby the construction contractor can begin the long lead items such as shop drawings and that sort of thing. It would not allow for construction, as construction is not intended to commence until January. So with that, subject to your questions, I would recommend approval.
I just have one question. We'll make a motion. We'll take a motion to approve.
Before we finalize this, did you have one question?
Yes, just, this is CF Jordan Construction LLC. Is this going to be rolled into the new organization, or is it going to be standalone? How are we going to handle this going forward? Or are we going to change the contract to Jordan Foster, whatever it is?
The bid was submitted under the name listed. I believe there's an individual from the group here that perhaps they could provide some input for you.
Good afternoon. My name is John Goodrich. I'm the Executive Vice President of currently Jordan Foster Construction, previous CF Jordan Construction. If it is possible, and we would prefer to have the contract reassigned to Jordan Foster Construction. If it's an issue, we completely understand. At the time of bid, Jordan Foster Construction was under review by TxDOT to become a TxDOT contractor, and that was one of the specification requirements. So we bid the job under CF Jordan Construction, which is still a functioning company and will be for another 2 to 3 years while we finish off the existing work that we have. So if we can reassign, that's fantastic. If we can't, we understand.
Is Jordan Foster
approved by TxDOT now?
Yes, sir.
So that would not be an obstacle for us?
No, sir.
Good.
So we'll, if you all provide approval for this particular resolution, then I'll task the attorneys with looking at this matter and seeing which way they recommend that we go.
Yeah. I don't have a problem. I just want to make sure for the record that we're clear who was going to own the contract and who was going to be held responsible. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I think we had a motion from Mr. Adame, and then we had a second from Ricardo. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. With that, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Item number 4 is approved. Congratulations to CF Jordan. I would like, Raymond, just as a side note, we've got a long lead time on this particular project. Well, a couple items for follow-up. We want to follow up to see if this particular project can be assigned, and then we'll follow up with Mr. Goodrich on that particular item. I would also like, we've got the limited ability to, the limited notice to proceed. I'd like to, sometime between now and January, the start date, I'd like to get the plans. I'd like to review those or talk to Representative Acosta, see if she'd like to see those, to make sure her concerns in regards to pedestrian amenities and lighting that she addressed are well covered prior to us beginning construction in January. And I believe that the completion date is scheduled for August 2014. Is that correct?
August or September, yes, sir.
So if you would follow up on the two particular items regarding the assignment and then the meeting sometime with Representative Acosta, should she so desire, with us, our GEC, and CF Jordan or Foster Jordan, and then we'll proceed from there.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Item number 5, discussion and action on a board resolution to authorize the executive director to execute the following instruments as they relate to Loop 375 Cesar Chavez Border Highway Managed Lanes Project. A project operating agreement with TxDOT, and B, a maintenance service agreement with TxDOT. Mr. Tejas?
As you know, this item has appeared on various agendas in the past few months. We got stuck negotiating these last two agreements with TxDOT. The prior agreement to this was the financial assistance agreement in the amount of $9.4 million. That was approved back in July. These two remaining agreements have now been negotiated, and I believe that we're ready to move forward. So let's talk about each of them separately. Item 5A then is the project operating agreement, and as we've discussed in the past, the operating agreement is really the instrument that actually provides the authority to the Regional Mobility Authority to actually operate the Cesar Chavez Managed Lanes project. So that lays out all of the responsibilities of the Regional Mobility as well as TxDOT. So that's what the project operating agreement does. It sets those certain minimum requirements for this facility, such as insurance and that sort of thing. So that's what the operating agreement is. Item 5B then is the maintenance services agreement. So this is the agreement that actually essentially hires TxDOT to complete the maintenance services for the maintenance of the managed lanes. And the reason why we did this, rather than going out and hiring a maintenance firm to manage to take care of the managed lanes themselves, is that we wanted to leverage TxDOT's unit pricing power. So really, when you look at the lane miles that TxDOT has in this region, it's just shy of 5 million lane miles. The RMA is looking at bringing on about 18 miles. So as you can imagine, the unit cost for lane mile maintenance using TxDOT as the provider would be much less than if we were to go out and hire someone directly. So that's why we went through the process of evaluating a maintenance services agreement with TxDOT. So what you see before you then is an agreement between TxDOT and the RMA, whereby the TxDOT will be providing their maintenance services for the managed lanes in essentially the same manner that they're providing services to the rest of their lane miles in the region. That's really the gist of it. As I mentioned before, the $9.4 million loan has already been approved by this board and will be signed by TxDOT concurrently with these two agreements. And these are essentially the last three agreements that we have that we needed for with TxDOT. As I mentioned to you before, we're working with our GEC team as well as our marketing folks to put together a presentation that will really break down the Cesar Chavez project, how it works, all the different components, and we'll have that to you, I believe, in the October board meeting. And that'll really show you how all of these pieces line up and how the project will actually operate. So we're putting all these pieces together, and these are two of the last pieces that we need with TxDOT. Subject to your questions, of course, I recommend approval.
I had one quick question. I just wanted to kind of understand the timing on how we're paying TxDOT. From what I believe I saw was they're going to bill us in arrears for any of the routine maintenance, so every August, and then they're going to bill us up front for any capital improvements. And those will be determined, and I believe what happens is in every August, and in this particular case, next August will only be 3/4 of a year, so it will be prorated for the routine maintenance, and then any capital improvements will be decided on in that August for the coming year and then paid in advance, correct?
That's correct.
And then we draw from that maintenance money agreement that we've got from TxDOT then to then pay for that routine maintenance and any capital improvements.
That's correct.
Okay.
Raymond, and there was a financial model, based on this, that after so many years, if it didn't pay for itself, it would revert back to an open road. How does this transfer of the maintenance from the RMA to TxDOT affect that model?
It does not. The maintenance expenses were built into that model, and everything that we will negotiate with TxDOT will fit into that model as well. So part of what we will be doing and what you see in the agreement is the requirement that we sit down with TxDOT periodically to work out what those maintenance requirements will be, and more importantly, what we will actually be charged at the end of the year. So if we see that TxDOT is actually doing much more maintenance than our budget allows, then we'll have to cut it back, and those periodic meetings with TxDOT will really the main role of those meetings will be to make sure that we're not exceeding the budgets that we've established for ourselves.
Okay, that was my question, because we know we have a budget for maintenance, right?
Absolutely.
And TxDOT's aware that there is a budget for it, and they'll have to stay within that budget?
That's correct.
Okay.
And really, honestly, this is one of the main issues. This is one of the two issues that kept these items from coming back to the board. We evaluated, went back and reevaluated, and looked at various different models by which we could establish the fee to TxDOT. This is we believe, the most appropriate, both TxDOT and the RMA.
But you haven't negotiated those fees yet, right?
No, sir. But the process by which we establish what the annual routine maintenance will be established at, that process is what we've all agreed makes the most sense for everybody.
So at this point, all we're left with is just the operation of the managed lanes, which is to collect the tolls and
Correct.
then pay expenses, one of them now being maintenance to TxDOT?
That's correct. Now, remember, too, we would have done this whether we had hired TxDOT or
Understand.
somebody else. So that the fact that it's TxDOT is a little bit unique, but the fact that we are required to do maintenance is not unique.
No, I
And we have
understand
to
that.
do policing, we have to do everything. These managed lanes in each direction are entirely ours. So everything that's required to keep them, keep electricity to them, keep them running, up and running, all of that is our responsibility.
And who's going to do that for us?
TxDOT's going to do the majority of it.
Is it?
Everything from snow and ice removal.
Right, but that's the maintenance, right?
Correct.
All
All
part
the
of the maintenance
maintenance.
agreement, to graffiti removal, to
Okay.
sweeping, to repairs, and somewhat like a new car, you've got a lot less expected maintenance costs
Sure.
the first years, and then in the later years down the road, that's when you anticipate a larger amount of maintenance, and that's kind of how I believe our funding agreement is set up, somewhat with that in mind. So we are still need to figure out the exact pricing for how those services will be priced out from TxDOT on the routine maintenance. Is that correct, Raymond?
Correct. We'll do that each year.
And does the tolling equipment fall under the maintenance?
No, the tolling equipment falls under the integrator agreement that we have
So
with
we don't have to
Telbank.
worry about those. So in essence, really, all we need to worry about is collecting the tolls on the managed lanes.
Well, we're managing all of these contracts. So
Right,
while
we're managing the
while
contracts,
we-
not the work.
We're managing the contracts and picking the vendors to do that.
Exactly.
TxDOT
Well,
is going to be
we-
working
we-
for the RMA.
Right.
That's right. We don't have staff to do any of it.
Exactly. That's why I want to make sure that we don't have any, we're not going to, we
No,
don't
sir.
need to.
Okay.
What's interesting is
Absolutely correct.
we also have to negotiate an agreement with the El Paso PD to police the managed lanes,
Right.
because that's not part of the current network. So, these basically are our facilities, and everything from the maintenance to the signage to the toll collection to the policing to snow removal. With the majority of it being handled in this agreement, the maintenance service agreement, I mean, there's a very comprehensive list. Clearly shows what's TxDOT responsibility on the managed lane, what's the RMA list, and and they'll even, I believe they're even providing on a contract basis maintenance of the signage used for the toll roads. So it's they provide all the lighting for both the managed lanes and the toll. So it's fairly comprehensive.
So we're outsourcing all aspects except the management of the vendors and the contracts.
That's correct.
By the way, what's the speed limit on the managed lanes? Is it the same as the other lanes?
Yes, it is.
Is it? Can we raise it, lower it?
No, but remember, the point of this managed lane is to keep a certain level of service,
Yeah.
C. So anytime that level of service starts to degrade, then I'll come back to you with a request that we increase the tolls in that time period so that the level of service always continues to be C or
Yeah, but I'm
greater.
talking about the speed limit. Somebody asked me the other day, is the speed limit going to be the same on the managed lanes as they are on the, since they're private lanes?
Do we have the ability to change the
Raise them
speed
up.
limit on that facility? I know those roads are designed within a certain speed parameter.
Yeah.
Can you find out?
Sure.
Just curious, somebody was asking me.
There may be a little bit of an advantage if there's a higher speed limit on that particular facility, if we're allowed that.
Exactly.
When we were building Americus, that road was designed for a certain speed limit, so or the area next to it. So that's the most that we could sign that road for.
I can add a little bit of, and I don't know if the mic is turned on or not. But normally what happens when we look at increasing speed or lowering speed is that we will request the appropriate police department, whether it be a state patrol, what have you, to do speed studies. And based on those studies, then the recommended speed will be assigned. But we need to make that initial first step.
It's interesting. I know there was a facility outside of Austin where they just raised the speed limit. Got a lot of news. I don't know what it was, 90 miles an hour, I believe.
Oh,
Well, I don't see that being prudent here. It's just, perhaps, I don't know. I'd be curious to see what leeway we have there.
I'll find
That
out.
question hasn't been asked before.
Absolutely, I'll look into it.
Any questions, other questions on 5A, the project operating agreement, or B, the actual maintenance service agreement? Is there a second? All those in favor?
aye.
All those opposed? 5A and B are approved. Item 6, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing executive director to execute an extension of the agreement with the CRRMA's current general engineering consultant through January 16, 2015, and to begin the procurement process for the general engineering consultant to commence in January 2015. And there is just the attachment or the resolution attached to that. Mr. Tejas?
So as you know, as we just discussed, the RMA's staffing is very limited. We've hired and rely heavily upon our general engineering consultant. We entered into our general engineering consultant agreement 5 years ago, and it's set to expire in January of 2014, January 16th, I believe, of 2014. As you also know, we are in the midst of a number of projects that we're relying on the general engineering consultant to get us through. So I felt at this time, my recommendation to this board is that we extend the general engineering consultant agreement by 1 year, but also authorize me to begin the procurement process for a new general engineering consultant to take over at the end of this extension. So that's ultimately that's the request.
And not necessarily a new GEC. We're basically going to put out to bid, and potentially we could wind up with the same GEC that we
Certainly.
currently with today.
Absolutely.
Mr. Tejas and I discussed this, and I also thought it was prudent that we extend this for a year based on some of the continuity on the projects that we're looking at. So is there any questions from the board?
The fees will stay the same.
Well, what I'm asking for today is the authorization to sit down with the general engineering consultant and negotiate some terms, and I'll bring those terms back to you at the next board meeting, and that we'll identify if there's any rate increases, requested rate increases, or any other details that would change.
Or rate decreases?
Right, we'll look into rate decreases is actually what we'll be looking at.
And concurrently, you want permission to go start moving forward for an RFP process for the same services.
Correct. That's correct.
I have a question. Is there a time limit when we can keep our consultant under contract? 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, or there's no time limit?
This agreement was for 5 years, and it's coming towards the end of the agreement is why we're doing this. I'm not aware of, I think the 5 years was set by us. We could make that, depending on what the board chooses, a 3-year. I wouldn't suggest longer than 5, but I think we could make it shorter than 3, which I'm not sure would be prudent either.
No, my only question is reference, in other states, there's a certain time limit that you can do for consultants before you have to hire another set of consultants. I don't know if that's the way it is in Texas.
I'm not aware of any limitations other that certainly there's a reasonableness standard. You couldn't go into a well, actually, that's not necessarily the case. I know of several consultant contracts that have been renewed annually for decades.
Okay.
I'll ask the attorneys for if there's a statute in place that governs this, but I had in fact run this proposal to extend the contract by 1 year by the attorneys, and they had no concerns with it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
When the original contract was done, did we allow for extensions?
It was silent. Right. It was a 5-year term only.
And maybe in the next one, you can say a 5-year term with
Certainly.
1-year extensions.
And in fact, what I'll ask of the board when we come back is what you would like to see. Would you like to see a 3-year with 2 1-year options, a 5-year with single options? We can evaluate that as we go through the process this next year. And we'll look at what the other RMAs are doing and other agencies that are like us to see what best practices are currently. Right.
There was a fairly good amount of participation last time. I believe I sat on the selection committee. I believe there was 2 or 3 entities that were interested in becoming our GEC at that time. So I would imagine that we would have the same. If not, I think there would be some interest going forward.
I am asked regularly when this contract is coming back up, so I'm assuming that there is interest.
And then I think the GE had local partners, right?
Yes, sir.
Are you kind of insistent on that?
Absolutely.
In some form or another?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then we'll just send it forward.
Yes, sir.
Any motion?
I need a motion whenever we're ready.
Move to approve.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Item 6 is approved. Item 7, update, discussion, and action on the Executive Director's Report A, Bike Share Program, and B, the vehicle registration fees imposed by the County of El Paso. Mr. Tejas?
So item 7A is the bike share program update, and unfortunately there's not a great deal to share with you all. Of course, TxDOT, as we discussed at the last meeting, has essentially refused to sign the funding agreement, and that continues. And TxDOT actually has now placed an item on the MPO's agenda, the governing board for the MPO for tomorrow, whereby they're asking to deprogram the entire $2 million for the bike share program. So they're looking to, I guess, reallocate those funds. So there's actually 2 items on the agenda for tomorrow's TPB, Transportation Policy Board. One would deprogram the $2 million and bike share program dollars. The second would then seek authorization to essentially do a call for projects, whereby all of the MPO entities would then seek to use those $2 million for other projects. So that's what's been posted for tomorrow, and of course we'll keep an eye on that, and I'll let you know what happens. Ultimately, if that is successful, then I will be back to you all in the next month to essentially terminate the agreements that the board authorized me to execute between the RMA and UTEP, the RMA, the city, the MPO, and TxDOT as well. A procedural step, but we ought to close that loop next month.
So the update to the bike share program is that there is no bike share program.
That's essentially correct.
But that doesn't mean that should funding become available, either through the MPO, through the RMA, potentially, that we could look at creating a bike share program on a limited scale, on the scale that we were looking at originally. So we still have that as a potential program down the road.
That's correct. And in fact, I made a commitment to sit down with the Downtown Management District, the City of El Paso Sustainability Group, UTEP, and Fort Bliss, each of which are still very interested in implementing a bike share program. So we've committed to try to figure out how to make this work.
Brandon, just remind me, what was the reason that they decided to drop this as an issue with the CMAQ funds?
Correct.
The issue was really with TxDOT. TxDOT, as these are federal funds, and correct me if I'm wrong, Raymond, TxDOT basically approves how these funds are being utilized, and TxDOT, as I understand, would not sign off on this agreement in regards to the use of these funds.
It's actually a little more nuanced than that. So these are federal funds, so they come through the FHWA. FHWA had provided what's referred to as they've essentially approved this project to be eligible for CMAQ funds. So the federal part had been blessed. What happens, though, then, because they are federal funds, is that they're managed by TxDOT, by the state DOTs. So the state then has to sign a funding agreement between the state and the local entity that's going to use the funds. And really the point of that agreement is only to basically identify all of the responsibilities that the local entity has to comply with, all of the federal regs and that sort of thing. So really it's the delegation of the responsibility from the feds down to the state, and then at that point the state signs a funding agreement with the local entity. But essentially what TxDOT has decided or has determined is that these are not, in their belief, these are not the best use of these particular CMAQ funds. I think they'd like to see them used in a different project. They haven't identified one that I'm aware of, but they didn't feel that this was the best and most appropriate use for CMAQ funds for this particular region.
And that's what will be decided tomorrow at the
Well, so the TPB tomorrow, as the local governing board of the MPO, will take up TxDOT's recommendation and essentially say, yes, we agree with you, and we'll either have a call for projects, or who knows, they could take a number of different actions tomorrow.
It just seems like why would they turn it down if they don't have another project in mind, and other cities have used these funds to fund exactly the kind of program that you're considering funding. So
When I watched Channel 7 Extra a few weeks ago when this issue first came out, and the district engineer, Bob Bielik, was on there, and he I believe suggested potentially some other projects at that time that this could be utilized for. I think one of the projects that he said on that interview was potentially this pilot project at the bridge as far as reducing congestion and improving air quality. So I think there was several projects that were being looked at.
Right, and they just haven't formally said this is the project that we would prefer to see these funds used for. That's correct. I should have been more complete with that answer.
So I believe they have some areas they're looking at, but to Raymond's point, I don't believe that they've been identified where the funds are going to go.
In terms of projects, there's always any number of more projects than there are funding. That's always the case.
Right.
Especially since the federal funds have been reduced so much for any number of reasons. But in my 30 years, I've never seen TxDOT act this way. I'm not getting at them. I'm just saying they've never done this, and so always there's a position when a project is up for review. It goes through the TPAC, and the TPAC is the technical committee. That's when you roll up your sleeves and bring out the shovels and the baseball bats, and everybody comes to an agreement. And then it goes to the policy board where they make a determination. Sometimes they'll send projects back for further reviews, and they'll reject them. But now this one project went all the way down and approved by the NPO, and went down to the state and was approved at the state level. And then TxDOT said, wait a minute, we have a change of heart. So now they're bringing it back. The deciding body is not TxDOT, it's the NPO that makes the decision. So that's why they're going back again. They had like an oops moment after so much time had come up. But as far as projects, there's a number of more projects. As to what is better, I'll leave that up to them. But certainly, I'm a proponent of multimodalism. We've got to get off the idea of building. But there may be other projects that are better suited.
So there's no action on that one. I'll continue to keep you posted, and as I mentioned, if the item passes at the Transportation Policy Board meeting tomorrow, then I'll bring back a procedural item to close those contracts. Item 7B then is the vehicle registration fees imposed by the County of El Paso, and I sent you all an email, and I'm sure that you saw some of the media reports on this. As a reminder, in the last legislative session, the legislature actually passed a bill that would allow for the County of El Paso to implement a vehicle registration fee of $10, and that $10 would then flow from the county to the Regional Mobility Authority in El Paso County for use on transportation projects, specifically really roadways. So that was passed in the last legislative session. The issue, though, was that it had to, if the County of El Paso was to take advantage of it in this next coming fiscal year, they had to approve it prior to September 1, and they had to implement it so that they had to actually, the Commissioner's Court had to actually approve it prior to September 1 so that it could be implemented on January 1 of 2014. On August, I guess it was 29th or 30th, I believe it was 30th, on Friday, the Commissioner's Court met and actually approved the implementation of this fee. So in terms of next steps, the Commissioner's Court actually did a couple of things. They implemented the fee and they directed staff to negotiate an interlocal agreement with the Camino Real RMA, whereby the projects that the vehicle registration fee could be used on would be identified within that interlocal agreement, with a third point that if an interlocal agreement could not be negotiated between the county and the Camino Real RMA, that the county could go out and create its own regional mobility authority, which is a possibility for them as well. So having said all that, I was asked to meet with the county staff, and we're going to meet next Tuesday to begin negotiating an interlocal agreement. So this is more of an update than anything else. What I've included as part of your backup is the PowerPoint presentation that the county staff put together and gave to Commissioner's Court at the end of August. And you'll note, I think about 8 or 10 slides that are included in there from the RMA, and we presented those to the Commissioner's Court as well when they approved this item. So that's the backup. And, of course, I will keep you posted as to the process.
Were any potential projects discussed or
They did.
brought up?
In the PowerPoint, they mentioned specifically East Lake.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll recall East Lake was one of the projects that we had identified for as a potential project on the TRZ program that we helped the county develop. So really, one of the things that we'll be doing is trying to figure out how to really place these projects into the TRZ fund or into the vehicle registration fund, or how we want to kind of move those around. So it's a good issue to have, because really we're talking about an additional influx of transportation funding. It's just a matter of figuring out how to get these things done. So it's a good thing.
And it's a substantial amount of funding that very consistent, can be leveraged in regards to the RMA passing some bonds potentially. So has the ability to provide a lot of transportation dollars very quickly and get some major projects off the ground in today's dollars versus 5, 7, 8 years down the road from now. So it's I think it's a great thing for this region. It's just, as Raymond mentioned, it's a function of working out the interlocal agreement and specifically identifying how those funds will be utilized, and then working that out with the county. So Mr. Tejas is the one that gave that presentation to the county, did a great job. Raymond, thank you for that. I applaud the county for taking the step to make this happen. This was a big step, it was a bold step, but it was an important step.
Just a quick question, Randy. We've identified $30 million. Is that that's from the $10 fee?
That $30 million was what the county projected the vehicle registration fee would generate.
$10. Are there any other funding sources that will contribute to this particular?
Well, no. What was passed was just the vehicle registration fee, which was up to $10, and they actually implemented the full $10. So that $30 million is what would be generated only.
Okay, so what we have to live with is, what we're looking at is about $30 million based on those projections.
Based on the county's projections.
We're going to try and leverage those dollars? Is that what we're going to try and do?
I think that makes the most sense, certainly. And what we would do with any project is, the first thing we would do is identify how much funding we have and what other funding we could leverage it against, whether it's MPO dollars, TxDOT dollars, or elsewhere.
Sure. Now, there's a TERS that's been created originally to support these projects.
Correct.
What's going to happen to that revenue?
Well, so that's what I was referring to earlier. Now we have two revenue streams. One is the county TRZ, one is now the county vehicle registration fee. When we had originally this initial single pot of projects. So what we will likely start doing on Tuesday with the county is having them list all of the projects that they really want to get done. And that may now expand, since now we're talking about two funding sources.
Do you recall what the funding was from the TERS? What
It was around $75 million. Is that correct, Raymond?
Yes, sir.
Over 5 years or what? 10 years?
30.
30 years.
Correct.
But if we look at, to compare apples to apples, do we have a 5-year funding stream for the TERS only?
No, but what I'll do, I'll ask our financial advisors to put them side by side so we can see what we're talking about.
Right, because we
Absolutely, I can do
projected a
that.
5-year window for this vehicle registration, right? It'd be nice if we had the same
Sure.
forecast for the TERS so we can see what really we need to look at in the next 5 years.
I can do that.
So between the TERS and between the vehicle registration fees, you're talking about potentially being able to do projects well north of $100 million. It's substantial in terms of what that money can do. The big key is, as I've discussed with Mr. Tejas, is coming almost with like a mini comprehensive mobility plan, identifying the projects, the priority for the projects,
Right.
the dollars for the projects, listing those out, and then executing that.
And there are no limitations on how we can leverage this fee or the TERS, for that matter, Raymond? Or, in other words, right? Do we want to leverage these dollars to use it as backstop or great creative? There are no...
We've talked to our bond counsel about leveraging the vehicle registration fee, and they've given us some preliminary estimates in regards to the TERS, somewhat the same thing. So how that would be handled, just the escalation above the property taxes above the base year. I know there was some issues in regards to the TERS with Socorro. I don't know if that's been resolved yet.
A new TRZ is being recommended that it be created.
So that may move the base year for that particular TRZ to 2013. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
How would it work?
Okay, I just want to make sure we're comparing the same windows for one or two TERS or the vehicle registration, so we know what kind of money is being generated within that particular window.
Well, the nice thing about this is there's a lot of flexibility here with how these funds can be spent. Mixing and matching between the projects, utilizing the TERS and the VRF, utilizing the VRF and partly the TERS. There's a lot of flexibility that can be, once the project list is decided, how to spend those monies.
Absolutely. And one other note that just to show you what's going on statewide, there were other amendments made by the legislature in the same session that allowed Webb County to do the same. It also allowed Bexar County to do this. And then lastly, it actually allowed for Cameron County to increase their current $10 vehicle registration fee to $20.
Whoa.
It requires a referendum in their county,
Yeah.
but that was approved as well. So all of those were approved, and I would note Webb County created their $10 vehicle registration fee last month, as did Bexar. So all three, Webb County, Bexar, and El Paso implemented these. I would note too, Webb County created the vehicle registration fee. Now they have to go create their RMA. So they don't have an RMA just yet.
And the other way around, huh?
That's right.
Okay.
But they're looking forward, obviously.
Did you tell them we could implement that for them? Could they use an
I've made a
use
couple
an
of calls.
RMA outside the county?
Exactly.
That's right. I've made a couple of calls already.
Save me some time.
I mentioned, Raymond, that the MPO staff is working hand in hand with you in the county, because once we get the county to prioritize their projects, they'll have to be in the proper network, and they just finished their model right now.
That's correct. Yes, sir. So that's all I have for you, subject to your questions, of course.
You need a motion for this, or this is FYI?
No, this
No
is just
actions.
strictly
FYI.
information only. Any other questions in regards to any of the topics on the vehicle registration fee? No? With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second? We are adjourned. The Community Reality Mobility Authority is adjourned on 3/18 on Thursday, September 12th, 2013. Thank you.